I'm Averie.
And I'm Mel.
This is the Veda Lounge podcast.
All things Vedic, cosmic, and magic.
For yoga teachers, entrepreneurs, creatives, and coming back to your own center.
We explore themes on living like you practice to knowing your nature.
Join the conversation for an embodied homecoming to illuminate your radiance.
Through getting nerdy with Vedic sciences and self-discovery, cozy into your cosmic cadence. Welcome to the Veda Lounge podcast. It's Mel here.
Hello. It's Averie.
And we're excited to kick this thing off. And Averie and I were talking about one thing that could be really cool is to share a little background on Averie, her story, and how these sciences have transformed and impacted her life. You know, I think it's easy, you know, when you see these names like Averie, Mel, like who are these people even? And for you guys to build a deeper relationship with her because, you know, when I met Averie, she joined our yoga teacher training program, and immediately, you know, we related on being military spouses. There was a lot of mutual interest, and getting to know her over the past 2-3 years, you know, getting to know the just the depth that exists there and the natural connection that flows. I want you guys to get to see that part of her. So I want to start with the first question is, because I know you're really a skeptic in a way. Averie's are like down to earth, no BS. Like she's going to ask the questions. And I would love to hear your first thoughts. Like when you were signing up for yoga teacher training, kind of where was your mind back then about why you even wanted to pursue this path?
Oh, so I think, well, I have to hop in and predate that a little bit because really what happened was after the birth of my daughter, I went to my first yoga class. And I actually took her with me. It was a mommy and me yoga class, and my sister-in-law drug me out to it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is silly. Why are we here? And 45 minutes into the class was like crying literal tears onto my infant child who was laying on the mat. And my sister-in-law was like, are you okay? What is actually happening? Like, do we need to get up and go? And it was in that moment, you know, I mean, that was just kind of a peak, right? Where I was like, oh, the potency, it really had hit me. And I had done yoga at home, YouTube, all these things, right? But in that moment, I had realized just how disembodied I was as a new mom, right? That's really difficult, but also, right, with prior experience with sports, you and I have talked a little bit at length about, you know, I was a competitive cheerleader for years, right? And I was severely disembodied. Sports like that, I think at a young age can really kind of shift how you view yourself and can be really damaging if not done properly. And it was the first time in a really long time, that 45-minute class, that I felt I had an agency over my own body. And it was massive and it was huge. And I'm looking down at my 4-month-old daughter and I'm like, I don't want you to have this massive aha moment like this. Like, I just want you to grow up, right? And feel embodied in who you are. And so from that moment, I mean, I never left, right? It became just really ingrained because I think I craved that feeling of coming home. And through, you know, a really stressful period in my life, you know, with my partner and us moving and figuring out the logistics of this new life that we were stepping into, yoga was really my anchor. And it was my anchor back to myself, right? When everything else was shifting. And so we found ourselves, you know, in North Carolina, and I practiced at a studio there, you know, very, very regularly. And I think it was just, you know, sitting there and I had no intention of teaching yoga. I just had such a desire to go deeper. I truly, like, I couldn't get enough. I was like, I just, you know, and then it was throughout the process and throughout the training where I really felt called to start to share because it was so powerful and so potent in my life, that there was no way that, you know, it couldn't be for other people either.
I
Right.
love that you shared that the aspect of new baby. A lot of times, like a lot of people or women start yoga when they're pregnant. I find that a lot. It's like, yeah, I started when I was pregnant, or,
Mhm.
once I had my, third child, or, whatever it is. And I
Mhm.
think that a big piece of this is in our culture, right? And especially around these, having a child, I look at any big event as it's a biographical disruptor. It's like a change in our story and our identity. And
Absolutely.
being the portal that it is, when we utilize these different modalities to remember who we are, because even years in parenting, or like you used with competitive sports or just a lot of performance based things, we forget ourselves so easily in this culture. So I love that you connected those things. Was there something in training, like a modality, a topic that really lit you up, and fortified that desire to share this work?
One thing specifically that really always stood out to me was Vedic philosophy. And I think that's such a big part of why I've followed the path that I've followed. And I think it's because it opened up an entire new world, right? I came into what I thought was yoga teacher training, that I was going to learn proper alignment, how to cue a class, right? All of the things, going to memorize all these postures and these beautiful shapes. And what I very quickly found was that while all of those things were so important and gave me such depth of knowledge, what I really clung to was, right, the philosophy behind why we do those things. And in that, right, I think blooms like your self-knowing. And that's why I initially had come to yoga, right? Because I had found my way back into my own body, but then it just bloomed into, okay, now I'm going to find my way back into my well-being, right? And so I think it just kind of naturally evolved. And I share that with people. They're like, well, if you've been in it, you've been in it. And everybody takes a different path, right? And that's totally fine. That's just been my personal experience. Also, the season of life that I'm in, like my yoga has drastically shifted into, it doesn't look the same way that it did 5 years ago. And that's absolutely okay. But I think it's having that breadth of knowledge of different things so we can choose what resonates in that moment.
Well, I feel like too, and I struggle with this as a instructor and teacher trainer, right? Is, I spent several years and super deep in the physical practice and all into structural rehabilitation and integrity of the spine and getting into the anatomy stuff and helping people piece their bodies back together physically. But what
Mm.
I witnessed again and again, and then what I found in myself, is that it was almost like you come back home to the body, but then really there's another doorway sitting at the bottom of that opens up all these different paths of self-awareness, learning how to be in our own energy. When you talked about, brought you to your body, but then you wanted to get into your well-being, this living like we practice component, it's hard to really grasp that if we're brand new to yoga, I think, because we're like the way it's marketed, you think it's just this fitness stuff, which is delicious and amazing and necessary for training the body. But there does come this point of, hold on, palms open. And I think that if we don't hold the permission for our practice to look unique in the different seasons, we end up bullying ourselves into saying we're not yogis, we're not good enough, and I'm out of my practice. So we completely discard all this evolution that we walked through for the years before, when really yoga holds so many paths to self realization on the mat and off the mat.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you talk about, right, all of the different paths. And I think you're so right, right? The second that we say, I'm not showing up in my practice the way that I was before, maybe it's, and we're so programmed to say, well, then that's not yoga. But if we truly sit with it, right, it is still yoga, right? I mean, my practice has shifted. I mean, oftentimes I'm hardly moving on the mat. And that's just my season of life. And that was really hard to accept in the beginning, but it was so wonderful once I gave in and was like, I'm going to surrender myself to this because clearly this is just what needs to happen in this season.
Well,
And
and
that's entirely okay.
to share a little background on this, right, which is kind of what brought this whole podcast together, is our love, our shared love for Vedic astrology and Jyotish. And so confirm, when you say season of life, I know circumstances,
Oh,
but is it
yeah.
also connected to your dasha, if you want to
Oh,
share?
absolutely. It's when I say season of life, I'm almost exclusively referring to that to that. But yeah, I am referring to right planetary period or dasha, which is unique to Vedic astrology or Jyotish. But yeah, you are absolutely correct.
Will you share a little bit about your, where you were
Mhm.
before, and then because it's really rare, honestly. I mean, just a few times in our life we have an entire dasha shift. And
Mm.
I know, Avery, you just recently went through a big dasha shift, and kind of share about like the version of you before and then what you noticed change, and how you're connecting this with your yoga practice.
Right. So I would I want to say maybe eight, nine, between 8 and 9 months ago. I shifted Dasha or major planetary period. And so I'm currently in a period of K2, or if you're familiar with Western astrology, it could be considered like your south node. And prior to that, I was in a major period of Mercury. And so the shift is big. If you're familiar with what, either of those planets represents, Mercury being very hermetic, very balanced, very cerebral. And for me, it was placed in my eighth house. So it has to do with things like psychology, yoga, the occult, hidden things, right? And so it's a constant. My brain at that period of time, which, was years and years of my life since childhood into, my adulthood, everything was very cerebral, right? And so it was a constant, you feel very in your head, but it's also a sense of balance because Mercury does represent that sense of balance as well. And so, right, I was so driven to learn all of the things, right? Like very, very Gemini-esque, right? Ruled by Mercury. Like I wanted to just taste all of the things. And it's why, I went back to school. It's why I shifted careers. It's why I got into yoga and psychology and all of these things, right? That are very eighth house. And then about 9 months ago, right, I start the shift in moving into K2, which is, I mean, a very, very internal planet, right? When we think about what it represents, it's deep spirituality. It can also be a little bit of disassociation, right? So my instinct completely, like if you want to, like if you like pull a sponge and all the water sucks out and it just like comes back into itself, like it's kind of truly what happened. But it's such a beautiful thing that I had the awareness of it because now, right, I don't have this, how it's reflected in my yoga practice. I don't have this practice where I'm hungry to go out and learn all the different types of yoga and practice all the different types of yoga. And now I want to sit there and maybe move a little bit and meditate and be in my own space and energy and not have to think about it.
Well, and that's a big thing with Key too, is that it is this intuitive, minimalist energy, right? Because it's a homecoming in more of a spiritual way. And all humans, like everybody, if you're listening, like every human is in a certain planetary season. And these shift and what they do in Vedic astrology. I mean, this was what sold me, because I kind of came in to, I mean, y'all got to remember that I was constantly like having to explain to the elders how like yoga wasn't a sin. Like I came from that background, kind of found my way. And then, but anything like, astrology or the unseen, it was like, no, 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 I need to scientize that and make that like, there has to be this scientific grounding. Otherwise, like, I don't play with woo woo. But there was circumstances in my life that erupted that being kind of a last resort to seek guidance from. But what sold me on it, of like, okay, wait, there's something to this, was when my mentor shared the dashas with me, the cycles and how they lined up to timing. like two exact dates of our lives. And this is where people come in with the question of like free will versus like, do we have free will? Right? Because if you're listening, you might be like, oh, okay, well, Averie's saying this, but it sounds like this controls our life. No, what it does is it activates energies in our circumstances and our consciousness, our subconscious, that lean us towards a susceptibility to these different themes. And what we do with that is it's designed to pull this out of ourselves so we can develop curriculum wise, like our soul, what are we learning? But it also keeps us on our path, right? Of as we evolve. So it's like Mercury would be a season, I think it's what, is it 19 years?
It's
17?
a long time.
It's a
It is
long.
a very long time.
Yeah, it's several. I think Venus is actually 20. It's got to be like, yeah, it's like I think it's 17 years for Mercury. But anyways, the that cycle, that period of time is a lot of your different interest, and like she said, cerebral and learning all these things, commerce, communication. It's very outward. And then the next cycle after Mercury, you go into Ketu, which then becomes very yin. And you actually see this pattern as the cycles go. Is one is yin, one is yang. It kind of has that energy of development. But when you learn these, and we teach this in our Jyotish program, but you learn these, this is a huge help with context to, okay, well, why am I navigating these struggles or these weird tendencies? And with Ketu, it's total minimalism. It's like, yeah, I don't really care to like prove myself at the studio. You're like, okay, that's cute. You can do crow. I've been doing crow forever. I'm bored. Like, it just changes.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's actually really funny. It's something I've noticed with it is right. And just like a funny story is I will be sitting in a class, like if I decide to go to class and they're like, and now we're gonna do this, and I will just lay there. just no,
Well, and without the consciousness, right, it can make you question, go like, am I, because we still have the monkey mind, right? Like we still have the aspects of being human. Like, do I really like this anymore? And maybe this isn't my thing. And, where it's actually, the practice is designed to evolve with us. So yes, with Ketu, it's a powerful, what is it, 5 years, 7 years is the full Dasha?
Seven.
7 years. Deep meditation. This is where, the dhyana practices and the raja practices, all of those things come up to deepen in our souls, like the immaterial aspect of the practice. So it'd be cool to find out what your dasha is if you're listening to this and explore like what kind of yoga can be really helpful, because not only with the four aims of life do they align with the different dasha periods, but also you can connect styles of yoga that can support those themes.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe we do an episode on that because that sounds fantastic. Yeah.
That would
I don't
be
know, but like, what would you? Oh my God, Mars. Oof.
power.
Ooh,
You
Mars is
gotta,
power.
if you're in Mars, Dasha, you got to learn self-control. You got to be able to
Right.
manage your aggression and the energy, but foster ambition so you're precise and active.
I would love to like take an inventory of different teachers and their style and what they teach, and then what dasha they're in, and be like, what?
That's so true.
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah. I mean, but it's pretty spot on because if you look at like what I traditionally teach in a class, it's intuitive movement. Like there's not a lot of borders, right. It's just very open. But yeah, I'm gonna go ask all the power teachers and then ask all the yin teachers and be like, fair.
There's also our sub dashas, right? Like
Hmm.
you're a student of mine, you've heard me talk about like last year I went into sub dasha with Rahu. So I'm in Saturn Rahu, which it's not an easy cycle. Literally, my mentor was like, "You just need to ride the waves, and it's gonna pass." But it's big, and I will say it's been getting to know this aspect has been huge for my mental health. To understand that it's not happening to me, it's happening through me. Like we can say that as theory, but truly by working with the dashas, it really helps us co-create, even if we're uncomfortable. Like Saturn is about soul lessons, right? So if you're in a Saturn dasha, you're dealing with karmic lessons, you're dealing with responsibility. And the fun comes later, because after you get through Saturn, you'll have a lot more fun. But it's a more serious time to build things. And so even if you have someone who, like, the first time, the way that this was described to me early on was like in a marriage. If you've been married to someone for 40 or 50 years, you're married to so many different versions of that human, because you might marry them when they're in their Saturn dasha and they're super serious, hardworking, and then they hit their Mercury dasha and all of a sudden they're buying a motorcycle without telling you and off to like India to go learn something. And you're like, who is this person? But it's because we go through these different changes.
I love that. And I think it's another reason, right? Just how powerful this is, because even being able to like sit and look at your partner or your child's like periods and dashas and go, oh, okay. And I think the biggest thing that has gifted me and a lot of people that I've talked to is it has made sense of so many things. It has the power to make sense of so many things that we've experienced and gone through in our lives. Like you said, when your mentor sat you down and things matched up to the date and you were like, hold up, wait, what? And that's like the period. And I'll be truthful, like that's really what sold me as well. When I was like, there is no denying this. Like, this is not, you can't make this up. This doesn't just happen.
It's a math. It's absolute math. And the more we learn, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this in other episodes, there is actually a lot of physics and mathematics that sits behind the cadence and cycles of this, because everything in nature is cyclical. It is a pattern. It is routine. Like, there's something magical about that duality of, there's this instability always in nature, this impermanence, and how these cycles change and things rhyme, but also that aspect of like it's consistent. Like, when you play with this stuff, it's pretty consistent. So I want to shift gears, and I would love for you to share your backstory. You shared how you came into yoga, just like kind of, if we were to do an interviewed teacher bio.
Oh my gosh.
Averie was born in
Hmm. Well, I mean, if I were to describe, that's always such an interesting question.
and it's the worst question to ask
It's
them.
always, you're like, oh God, what? I don't know.
They are.
It's our programming to be like, no, just little old me. It's fine. Nothing to know here.
You know what I did today? So last week I was super, because we're navigating military life stuff right now, and I was like, you know what I should do? I need a creative outlet to like express myself. So I went and I rented a saxophone. Like, no, I'm serious. I go there, and of course they're like, oh, are you getting this is your child in band? Like, here's the seasonal discount because all the band kids. I'm like, well, no, and he's like, I'll just give you the discount. I'm like, yeah, I'm not, I just want to rent this saxophone. So I rent this saxophone, right? And I was like, this is so great pranayam, right? Like, I'm breathing, I get to out and make this. And this is something, I played saxophone when I was in like 7th grade, which, holy cow, way harder than I remember. But I was able to play Ode to Joy, Mary Had a Little Lamb, Happy Birthday. And then I do have this gift that I don't tell people about because I don't want to ever be put on the spot, but I can like hear stuff and figure out how to play it. Like, I'm pretty good at listening to tunes and knowing like, okay, that's A, B, like what that is. Music.
Yeah.
So I've been playing like old hymns and like random stuff, like the different tunes, and just having the best time. So, like, fun facts. By the way, everybody, don't be worried about me. I went through it. We're good. I realized that was a little sub-life crisis.
Always surprising. I can't.
Taking the
What?
saxophone back.
What?
It's the Rahu. My Rahu is insatiable right now.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, as you're talking, I'm like, one thing I think that has always defined me, not defined me, I don't live defined by anything, but a characteristic that has always lived beside me is that like I am ever changing. And that is just, and I think that is true for a lot of us. But I think throughout my life, I've allowed myself to accept that. And right. And I think it's been really accepting that and allowing myself the permission to be an entirely different person tomorrow. Now, this is starting to sound like a personality disorder. I promise it's not.
But here's
But
the
it's like, but it's
It's
right.
the
It's like,
truth, right? Like
yeah,
and honestly, it's funny I asked you because I'm like, I don't know. How do we get our community? I want them to hear you and get to experience you a little bit more and more of your backstory. But it's interesting because trying to wrap up our soul in the English language is so challenging. And I actually think that's why there's a lot of suppression and anxiety and feeling like, am I adequate enough? Because we're not seeing, that like the fact that like I'm just using my saxophone thing, like I'm a
right.
musician this past week, next week I might not be playing the saxophone, but like we have so much
But
multifacetedness.
in giving yourself the permission to go, that's also okay. I think I've allowed myself that. I think I've always had such a strong desire. Like I always say, I just want to taste a little bit of everything. And that was obviously a lot of that, Mercury time period. Um, but I've always been okay, right, with just being whoever I wanted to be in that moment. And right, that has been, I mean, it's liberating, but it's all right. It can be scary too, to just be like, well, perception, right? I struggled a lot when I was younger with other people's perception of me. And how does that look if I do this and I don't stick it through or I don't, right? And so as I've gotten a little older, right, that's just become a lot less important. So now I'm like, hey, cool, go get me a saxophone, go this week and next week. I'm going to try this. I have an insatiable desire to just like experience it all. And I would say, like, another fun fact, right, is my biggest fear in life is that I won't have experienced all there is to experience. And that's kind of a silly fear because the reality is, like, in this lifetime, I won't get to experience everything, but I so deeply want to. Right. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. It's definitely the gift of presence, like the
Mm,
permission to be present. Because when we look at from a yogic perspective, right, like we can try to plan and control, and this comes from the Gita. It's like a lot of our suffering is by trying to control our life or control these outcomes. That I make these actions equals this result. And one thing I will say, a lot of people will even ask me, they're like, Mel, how do you do all this? How are you? And it's because I have an idea of the results I want, but I'm really more focused on the experience. Like I want to do it for the experience. I want to try this and see does the pasta stick or not. And I'm learning through. I love pasta.
I know. Same.
I want to learn through the experiences of this, and
Right.
I know human design is really great at articulating. Because what line are you? You're a one. No.
I'm a 6'2".
I was gonna say I knew you were like one of the internal ones.
Mhm.
And it's cool because these different modalities really give us a lens to collaborate and inquire about, who am I? Like, okay, that makes sense. And then it gives that permission to be more internal when we need to be internal or shift, trial and error.
Right.
Definitely, I'm a trial error person for sure.
F around and find out for sure as Mel.
Sometimes we find out and I go, oh no.
But it's like we're all learning from it. Are you the role model line?
Yeah.
Use a 6 line? Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah. It's
but the difference is like are you a ones? You're no, what are you?
3-6 human
Three
design.
six?
Yeah, so trial error, and then I try things, and y'all get to see me either burn or shine. I'm gonna light it on fire either way with that 3 line of trial error, but that
Mm.
the role model line of yeah, no, I can't hide. That's why I can't. My face will always tell what's going on. So
Oh, same. Same. That's it. Oh, there's a fun fact. I can't hide anything. My face says it all. Like, it's actually in some instances where it's like, oh God, I don't like, if I had a mirror placed in front of me, I would be honestly probably so embarrassed by what is on my face sometimes.
people are like, it's not that serious. I'm like, you're right. I am putting a lot of pressure on myself. Thank you for calling that out.
Right. Oh man.
It's It's so funny, but these are the sweet things I think about being human, and that the yoga practice really helps us soften into, where we can be so hard on how we express ourselves or how we define ourselves, but we are all, and this is what's so beautiful about sharing our stories and sharing different things, is that we're all that oneness, the unionship. We are all universally navigating the same challenges. It might be a different outfit, but it's the same structured challenges of the deeper aspects, the immaterial elements of being human, of belonging, and so forth. So, a lot of Vedic sciences dive into knowing our nature, right? Ayurveda is about the elemental aspect in our body, yoga is about the nature of our mind, Jyotish, the nature of our soul, and then our environments. So when you think about how these sciences have really guided you, you mentioned earlier coming home to yourself. What are
Mm.
aspects of how it's helped you know your nature?
So I think one way that has exponentially just shifted, right, kind of my own understanding of myself is how I show up as a teacher for students. Um, and what I mean by that, right, is knowing that I am not a carbon copy of anybody else as a teacher. And so when I first started teaching, I'll just kind of share, I was so scared to veer outside of the box, right? I was so scared in class that it wouldn't be received well, that I would say something that was kind of weird, or like, I mean, let's be real. I live in the South, so I've always been very careful about dialogue. There's a lot of religion here. It's easy to ruffle feathers. And so I was very like, kind of sucked in. And it was, that first few months of teaching, really, it was me just kind of trying so hard to fit what I thought a yoga teacher was. And as this was starting to happen, I was really diving into Jyotish, right? So understanding my nature, what it was that, I'm here to not only offer myself, but to offer my students, right? And so beginning to understand, right, and allow myself the permission to fuck up or F up, like to mess it up, to royally just like screw up in class. Like I was so rigid. I used to come in with like lesson plans. Like I would read off a page because I was terrified. Um, and I sat one day and I really was like, I don't think I can do this anymore, because I walk into that room, I'm stressed out because I'm so concerned with how it's perceived, so concerned with getting something wrong, that this just isn't fun. And I was like, this is going to be it. Right. I was like, this is not fun for anyone. And that, like, in the environment, right, of a yoga room or wherever you're teaching yoga, that is very picked up on, right? People are not idiots. People grasp that, like, just, how we do when we're in environments. And so I was like, I don't care. I'm going to walk in. And if this is the biggest mess that I have ever experienced, then it's going to be done either way. Right. And so I walked into that room and I was like, this is who I am. And I'm going to lay it all out I'm going to lay it all out on the yoga mat. And it was terrifying, right, to actually say the things I wanted to say, to guide people the way that I wanted to guide them, which, let's be honest, isn't always. I'm not an anatomy based teacher, right? I don't care what you're doing as long as you feel agency in your own body, right? And so for me, right, it was a huge exhale. I left that room that day and was like, oh, this is the beauty, right, of not trying to jam yourself into a box. Because not only was it liberating for myself, but I'm sure it felt wonderful to students in a class who can feel the authenticity coming through.
Yeah.
Because people just want to be seen for who they are, and they want authentic connection, especially from a teacher, right? And so to me, that's been the biggest gift, is to be able to not only step into who I am as a teacher and honoring myself in the process, but also, right, with all of the other relationships in my life, how I show up as a mom, right, to my child, while still, right, honoring who I am. Because, I mean, we can go down the whole rabbit hole of what it is to be a mom in 2024. And there's immense pressure around it, to be perfect, to look perfect, to do all the things right, and me just saying, it's okay to not be that. It's okay to show up as myself. And then what people in turn grab from that and learn from that, especially my child, is just like, it's okay to show up as you are.
Well, I think people are looking too, like we kind of are at a place that like we've scrolled through Instagram or social media so many years and seen like perfect in performance, or like there's enough places in the world to be judged. And I really feel like the last place that if we're going to be authentic to the essence of yoga, on the yoga mat, meeting people as they are, where they are, is modeling and training them how to be genuine in their lives. You know, when you talk about motherhood, like, I think kids can read through things real easy, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
they're quick. And being able to talk about, yeah, like mommy's scared right now and mommy's navigating big feelings, and this is how I'm going to take care of myself. Or yeah, mommy's crying. Yes, these are tears. It's okay. If you need to cry, we can cry together. And learning, helping our kids learn how to be in relationship to their own big feelings,
Mm.
and no longer being in this place of, I've always, the mantra that has stuck with me is the concept of connection over perfection. Like, I'm going to take connection any day over perfection. And I learned this early on in my teaching. I got very lucky where I was doing a lot of one on one sessions early on. So it's a lot easier to, like, what do you need today, and really adapt to the room. And
Right.
something that was constantly mirrored back to me is just how real, or how grounding, how that's why flowers are part of my brand, is because people were like, you make me think of a flower, like very grounding, earthy, and just how much refuge that is. Because when you look at all the other places we go in life, there's not a lot of places just to exhale and be. So, and I think there's something to this, and you're seeing the yoga industry starting to jump on this more and more, on like the permission to release that pressure. Even in, if you're like the fitness classes and really wanting to sweat, there's a way to do that by saying you could be here, here, or at your pace, right? And then as a teacher, it gives us room to be creative, right? When you're talking about like, I'm not following this paper anymore. I want to, like, what do I feel? Because maybe we can add creativity or unique textures to the yoga experience that maybe aren't what everybody gets every other time. So I'm just a pet. My little thing is just make sure you put it in your class description if you're going to go really wild with it. So, like, don't say like, vinyasa flow and very simple, and then they come in and it's like, we're going to make bracelets today.
I mean, I would be pleasantly surprised. Love a good bracelet making, but yeah, no.
Maybe right at the very end. But the point is like, yes, like that permission, like we can start to be creative as teachers and providers by opening the space for that. Like it doesn't have to be a vinyasa flow every time. Like maybe we do this unique event with the yoga.
I think it opens up a space too, right, for our teachers, right, to show up as who they are. And when you allow teachers to do that, right, the experience of that class, that workshop, that event is so much different. And that's why I'm such an advocate. I'm like, show up as you are, as exactly who you are. And I think the biggest piece of advice, I mean, is that you're not going to be for everybody, and how liberating, because you
Well,
don't have to be. And it's like,
yeah, there's so many people in the world. I remember back in, because San Antonio is an interesting yoga community, but like any big city, right? There's a lot of different communities within that. And I used to always like the concept of competition in a city, for example, always blows my mind because there's like what 3 million people here, Like there's not enough yoga teachers to serve 3 million people. And like when we look at the collective, there's so many humans, and if actually we're more genuine to how we want to express ourselves as artists, as teachers, as creatives or entrepreneurs, the more genuine we are in that, you have an infinite well within you to source from, and you have a very precise path forward because it's your essence. You're not having to pull from all these
Because it
places.
is you. Yeah.
Right. And then it allows more more alignment with people to happen, because it's, you're not performing something and then they're hoping for that, and then you got to keep playing the theater. Like that is exhausting, absolutely exhausting.
Oh yeah. And it's why I was like, at a certain point, I was like, I think I might, right? I was ready to call it quits. So I was ready to be like, this was great, clean my hands. Like, I'm
Like,
so glad that I didn't. I'm so glad that I didn't. Right. And I mean, showing up in that way it really translates to, it's just showing up in every other avenue of my life as I am.
mhm.
Right. And I think, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for both of us, but some of the best yoga classes or best yoga classes that I've been to are not classes with complex movement and flows and these classes that are, challenging and, or even just, crazy classes. It's the classes, right, that I feel a connection to the teacher, right? And it's the classes where you can feel the room exhale.
Hmm. In
That is like, to me, right? It's the biggest
your
thing,
body, because
right? And you're like, this is what we're here for.
yes. No,
This
we
is
went.
what we're here for.
I feel like too, there's a lot of pressure on teachers of like go go go, and so they teach these really fast classes, and then like they rush through the other side. And because I went to a class not long ago, and it was like boom boom boom, I thought I was doing Zumba. I was like, wait, yoga or Zumba? Like I need to taste the pose. Like let me receive the pose, right? But it's like I have compassion for. I think a lot of teachers will navigate that of like learning to slow down. That actually there is richness yielded in the quality of this stretch versus the quantity of how much
Quantity.
you can get into that hour,
Yeah.
right? So, and then in that, like actually getting to taste the experience, we're dropping into the body, and now the deeper things are happening in our relationship to ourselves and self-realization. So there's a quote, and it's by Rumi, and I want to share it with you guys. So Rumi says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about ideas, language. Even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. And the reason I love that, it's like beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. And I'll meet you there. And I really feel that way when we look at yoga philosophy and how it's like all these attachments to right way, wrong way, and how it contracts us versus presence sits in the middle. And presence asks us to operate from honesty of right here, right now, and taste it versus judge it or fit it into a future or compare it to the past. Like we have the gift of now that really can allow us to absorb the magic that is sitting right in our palms. And I don't blame humans or myself when I get tripped up over things, because that's how we learn. But trying to remember that there is a becoming that is always happening with our cycles, and like even the challenges, like if you're with it and kind of ride it, more data will come as we walk versus right away reacting. And I think that's a huge gift of yoga.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the space. Where else do we go where we have, I mean, in our lives, truly, like where else do we go that we have the space to just be present
Hmm.
without checking in to do so first, right? Because we can be present in every moment of every day if we choose, but it's like when truthfully, because we click on autopilot, we move through our day. And so, yeah, it's like yoga. Maybe that's the only hour of your day that you're really checked into sitting in that presence. And what a gift, right? To have found yourself in that hour.
So, if someone's new and they're listening to this episode, and you were like, maybe like two places to start, whether it's like, capital Y yoga, like all the big places with yoga, or just in their practice, what are a few places you'd recommend people to start to deepen into that knowing your nature and the coming home that you're talking about?
Mm. I would invite you to let yourself be surprised by what lights you up. And don't call yourself wrong, right? A lot of people come into yoga because of the physical benefits, right? Or you're getting a workout. Allow yourself to be open to tasting all of the other flavors, the slow, the subtle, and then allow yourself to follow that. Because I think sometimes we get really caught up in, I need it to look this way or be this way. And so approach it with an openness and taste as many flavors as you can. Because, like I said, what takes you, you might be really surprised by.
I like different styles and techniques.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
It's
actually what people don't realize is it's a wonderful thing when you go, I hated that. Because now you know. Like think about who is it? Michelangelo, like when he created that, I think David was the what they called the statue. But they were like, how did you know how to create David? And he was like, I got rid of what wasn't David. Okay, I don't know. Maybe hopefully that was a good little metaphor. But y'all get like let go of what isn't you. Like
right.
how do you know? It's like if you hated it, you didn't like it, or it's not true to you. Like perfect, great data.
And
So
then it's be open to the fact that you might hate it now, but you might love it later. My relationship with restorative yoga has taught me so much about who I am as a person because I tell you, I could not do it. I couldn't stand it. I was like, why do I need to sit here and lay on this mat for 60 minutes? I'm wasting my time. I could be working out. Why do I need to sit here with a blanket over my eyes? And literally, I think my words after the first class were, this was stupid. I got in my car and I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. I just paid money to come and take a nap. Truly. But you know what? Fast forward 5 years, I teach restorative yoga. It's my favorite type of yoga, right? So it's like not only be open to it, but be open to the fact that just because you hate it today, your taste buds might evolve and you might love it later.
yeah, or the thing you love today, like it's
You
part
might
of
hate it
that
later.
journey. And again, going full circle back to Dashas, kind of no
Mm-hmm.
pun intended because it is cycles. But anyways,
Yeah.
like going back to Dashas is it could also be like what you need for your season of life, even with your sub Dashas, right? Like definitely, and I love also pulling an Ayurveda to this, like with Vata, which is air. Treat Vata like a flower, Pitta, which is the fire. Treat Pitta like a friend, Kapha, which is like stuck earth, right? Treat Kapha like an enemy. So like power yoga is great. If you are dealing with any type of like energies that are heavy, go do your power yogas. If you're dealing with a lot of air and displacement, go do like warm flow, tender, right? Treat it like a flower. And then if you're dealing with pitta, like go do compassion based things. So like you can pull in how they all overlap with each other. And I always go back to is y'all don't even need to know a lot of this stuff. Like your body's going to tell you.
That's what I wanted to mention is that so much of it is innate knowing, right? Your body will generally, I mean, your body will know the answer before your mind ever does. So it's like, get on that mat and see, right? See where it goes. It's like your body is going to let you know what it needs. You just have to be willing to sink in and check in.
And trust it. Have y'all ever done the body pendulum? Averie, I told you about the body pendulum thing, right?
What? No.
So like what you do is you take like a hand to your heart, or you can literally take like a food or a crystal and you place it at your heart, and then you ask yourself a question. It has to be yes or no. And you might say like, should I do restorative yoga? And your body will either pull back or pull forward. And it's working with the energy of whatever you're asking, but it's like magnetizes forward, repel is back. And that's like a fun way too, when we talk about our body knows, like you can,
Right.
don't get too codependent on that kind of stuff. Don't start doing like, should I text so and so back? Like, hold on. I mean, maybe use the body pendulum if you really don't know.
Right.
I always put like with stuff like that, like I don't want people to like
The warning label, be like,
don't disassociate from your accountability to make choices. But it's also like it's a fun way. I love doing it with crystals, right? Like if I'm crystal shopping,
right.
like feeling in, and like if I'm pulled forward or if I'm repelled back, like it's learning just to
Mm.
pay attention. Like your body's magnetized to things, and your body, you're gonna sense. Like when I was in that Zumba yoga experience, I'm just kidding. It was just really intense, like way too fast. Like that
Right.
aggravated. I have too much air already. I'm literally in Saturn Rahu, Vata Vata. So that
Right.
was too much displacement, and that's probably why it aggravated my body. Where I'm sure in the room there's a few people who are like, "This is amazing." Right? So like all like she was saying, like all different flavors. We all like some of us like pistachio, some of us like vanilla, like you pick, right? So yes. Is there anything else that you would share with them to start and connect and deepen?
It doesn't have to be fancy. I think like we get really caught up when we are first starting that like I have to have the things, right? I need to go to this fancy studio. I need this mat. I need these cute yoga pants, right? It's all this external noise that kind of dilutes, right? What's actually happening, which is you just wanting to do something good for yourself. It can be something as simple, right, as opening a free video on YouTube, right, or the studio and laying out a blanket. You don't even need a mat. I just invite you to, like, it doesn't have to be fancy. And that's like, I think so many people don't start because they're like, oh, but I need all the things. You just need a body. Truly, you just need a body, right?
Man, I like laugh at that too because there is so much pressure of like you need to dress this way. When
Mhm.
I was first doing my yoga, because I used to be an athlete in high school. So when I first went to yoga, like everything I was wearing, every time I was wearing my soccer shorts and a big t-shirt. Like for the first, like even in teacher training, like soccer shorts and big t-shirt. Like I was like an athlete, like
I teach in big t-shirts. This is what I show up to teach in. And I'm like, maybe I should wear something form fitting so they can see my body. But that's also me showing up in my authenticity. I'm like, me is a big t-shirt. Like that's just how it's happening today. So, oh my
down,
God.
downward dog, like shirt goes up. Ah! But but your teaching restorative, so it's totally different. It's fine. I'm just kidding. But it is true to like let go of all these pressures of I need all these things or I need to look a certain way or have it. Like one of the most common questions I get when people are asking to sign up for yoga teacher training is they'll say, I don't know how to do a handstand. Like, will I be like and I'm like, oh no, I actually don't know either. But I feel awkward if I'm truly honest. Sometimes I feel really awkward because I know that they're coming from the framework that if you're good at yoga, you could do handstands. And
Right.
if I'm their trainer, as I'm telling them the truth that I don't know how to do a handstand, I'm like, I really hope this doesn't knock
Oh,
my credibility. But I can't lie, like I can't do a handstand. Much. I can use a wall, right? I can build strength. No, but it's so interesting how we do come in with like, that means I'm good. This means I'm not. And really it's about coming back to our hearts. So
right.
oh, I love this. I hope this was a great way for you guys to get to connect and get to know Averie a little bit and just even to play here in these conversations. We have more episodes to come and we're just so excited. Please feel free to send emails to us or contact through the website if you have requests on topics because we can also do that. And even if anyone's interested, we can do different live chart readings and things of that in the future for Jyotish. But this is really a playground of creativity that Averie and I want to share with you all. And it's so fun. So, any last words, Averie, for today's episode?
No, you said it perfectly.
Well, thank you. All right. You guys stay cozy, and we'll catch you next time.